I'm Jo, and I'm here with Andy and Jude, who set up the Joseph Foote charity when they lost their son Joseph to cancer. Hi guys, welcome to Kerrang.
Hi Jo.
Hi, Jo.
Can you start by telling us a bit about Joseph?
Joe was such a happy, funny little lad, and he was so handsome, but we would say that as his parents. And I can remember clearly when he was 2.5 years old, running around the caravan site with him, and he amazed me of how far he could kick a football. And we're quite sporty in our family, and he was certainly going to be a sportsman because he could keep up with me as his dad, as a 2-year-old, you know.
Right, yeah.
And I think one of the biggest things that Joe had was his compassion. It was so forthright as a kind of 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old. He always thought about the underdog and animals, and if one of his friends had a bad day, he was there for him, and it was quite remarkable, really.
So when Joseph became ill with the brain tumour, how did that affect him and the family as a whole?
Well, early diagnosis is a problem in general in brain tumours. Children don't get diagnosed in time. In fact, the average time for diagnosis is 5 months because the symptoms are like virus and flu and tiredness and headaches like a migraine. So the doctors often give you misdiagnosis, and it's some time before you find out they've got a tumour. Right. And we went through exactly those times. It was 5 months, wasn't it, Jude?
Yeah, and about 6 or 7 doctors we saw separately, didn't we?
Yeah, we did.
All diagnosing the
so
same thing.
So just be having an off day, or
yes, yeah.
Didn't really realise what was wrong for him. I guess being active, you'd notice when he wasn't full of beans, but.
Well, the biggest symptom is what they call lethargy, tiredness.
Right, yeah.
And it was Judy's sister, actually. After 4 or 5 months of us not knowing what was wrong with him, there were some children who were 2, 3 around the house all playing, and there was Joe lying on the sofa again. And Jude's sister said, this just definitely isn't right. There's something wrong. And in the end, Judy insisted that we had a brain scan, just from gut instinct. There was nothing to do with the brain. And or his symptoms weren't, and that was how we found out. And then, of course, your whole world comes crashing in, because we're a family like all those other thousands of families with no history of cancer or ill health. I mean, Joe's grandparents, all 4 of them, are still alive and healthy today. And when you're told that your son or your daughter has cancer, a brain tumour, I can't describe to you how shocking it is. You can't believe it. It takes a week for it to sink in, because why? There's so many questions. And then, of course, once you've come to terms with that, well, you don't get a chance to come to terms with it. You're straight on the roller coaster. You don't go home. You're diagnosed. It's almost like getting a sentence in a courtroom, and then you're down in prison, and that's it. You go in, they diagnose you. It's out the blue. You're in for operation, and then there's 3 months, 6 months recovery, and you just live in the hospital.
Which has a massive impact also on the rest of your family. We've got a girl who's now 16, but she was how old when Joe was diagnosed? About 6.
Yeah.
And while we were in hospital, she had to spend most of the time with the grandparents, so she was missing the whole of her family. Yeah. And she was more or less pushed to the back, wasn't she, while we gave all our attention to Joe, who needed it the most. And weekends were spent in hospital with, and Nancy was playing with other children in hospital instead of playing with her own friends outside, and everything changes.
But the one thing that carried us through all of those times, because it's a malignant brain tumour, these are the majority of tumours, cancer, they keep coming back. And the idea is that the treatments are, in general, radiotherapy and chemotherapy, like most cancers. But if they don't work, and in general they don't, because the survival rate is only 15%, they keep coming back. And so you go back for more operations. So to give you an example, we had that first shock, we had the operation, 8 hours. We could have lost him, but he survived. It was a miracle. They got it all out, which is really important for brain tumour survival, to get it all out. They managed to do that. He had chemotherapy for a whole year, which was really, really difficult. That's us staying in the hospital with him week after week, losing his hair, not wanting to eat, losing all his weight. So you feed him through a tube, and I can't tell you how difficult that is for the families to go through. But all along the journey, you always believe that they're going to make it. So this kind of hope, this British way of stiff upper lip and let's have some laughs and get on with it. And Joe was exactly the same. He dealt with all his downside with humour. And he was almost, like I say, a remarkable lad. And they all are, Joe. He acted like an adult, if you like. Yeah. And he would say, oh, never mind, and then take the mickey out of himself because perhaps he couldn't walk that day. And he used to do a little thing as though he was on a stick as an old man, you know, and take an impression. And
he sounds like an incredible little boy.
And that's how you get through it, you know. But the point I was going to make was, you think you're over it, you go through that hell, and you think you're over it. And in fact, Joe was, so he was 2.5 when he was diagnosed. He's now 3.5, 4. So he's had a year of chemo and the operation. And we think that's it. And families in general think that's it. So we had this horrible scare. We thought we were going to lose him, but he's had all this chemo and operation, and now he's fine. And in fact, he's starting school. And his hair's
growing back as well.
Yeah,
everything's
so he looks handsome again, and he's fit and healthy. The only deficit, every time there's an operation, you have a deficit because the tumours grow around nerves that operate your body. So the brain sends the signals to your body. And because the tumour grows around it, when they cut the tumour out, they damage the nerves. A nerve looks like a hair, you know, a hair on your head. So the tumour grows around these hairs, and they get damaged, so they can't send the signals. So there's something wrong with you afterwards. And sometimes it recovers and sometimes it don't. So Joe's first deficit was his left side weakness. So he kind of walked with a bit of a limp, and he ran with a limp. But, you know, it was a small price to pay if you save your life. And like I say, he was going to school at 4 and he was so handsome. We've got all the pictures of him in the video.
And then, children that age, they deal with things like that. It's a bit different when they're older, isn't it? And they're losing their hair and they've got deficits.
Yeah. And he did.
It's easier for
But then out of the blue, a year later when he was 5, he had 1 year of normality like that. And a year later it came back. What happens when you have a brain tumour is they put you on 3 monthly scans following your operation just to monitor that it doesn't come back. And he went 2 years without it coming back. I mean, some kids go 5 years, 10 years, and some adults do, you know. And then you live with this cloud over you, which all people do who get cancer, whether it's breast cancer or prostate or whatever. You're always got this cloud. Is it going to come back? And we were sure it was over, weren't we? And his cancer was over, and it came back, and it was just like another bolt. And then you start to, for the first time, then you start to think, my goodness, where's all this going? You know, is this going to keep coming back? Is he going to make it? And that was a big shock to us, wasn't it, Jude? And with Joe being so young at that stage, at 2 years old when he was first diagnosed, he didn't know anything. Yeah. And it was easy. Now he's 5 years old, and all of a sudden they start asking some questions. And of course, you know, there's a lot of kids who get this who are 9, 10, teenagers, and that's a difficult time to protect their fear about what's going on. And we managed to do a good job of that, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
But so.
There were a couple of occasions when he was frightened. He you know, for about the 18th time, you're taking him down to theatre, and he said to me the one day, you know, I was carrying him down to theatre, and he said, I just wish I wasn't me, Mum. I wish I was somebody else. And that really gets you as a mother. You know, you can't protect them. It's really difficult.
The survival rate's only 15%, and that the government haven't yet recognised that brain tumours are now the largest killer of children. It used to be leukemia, and now it's brain tumours. And that there are more people under the age of 40 who die from brain tumours than any other cancer. So the big cancers, they call them the big four: breast cancer, lung cancer, leukemia and prostate. These have got the kind of high profiles because they've had money. So breast cancer's had breakthrough and so on, and cure leukemia, etc. And the NHS cancer budget, less than 1% of that goes to brain tumours. It's almost like the lost kind of cancer, if you like. Yeah. And because of that, the other survival rates, they've had all the money, the other cancer survival rates, they're all up at 70 and 80% survival. And brain tumours have been left behind at 15. And when the public find out what's going on, that there are more people, you'd think there can't be more people dying of brain tumours than breast cancer. Breast cancer's all over the place, but there are. And so that is...
it's a shock to kind of hear
well,
that.
that's one of the reasons why we thought somebody's got to do something about this. And so we started to raise money part-time. Luckily, Joseph's oncologist, his cancer doctor at the time, had visions of starting a worldwide research program, but he couldn't get money from the government, so he needed to get it from parents and people to support him. And we decided to start this charity, raise £1 million for what he wanted to do. We knew it was going to take a long time, and it's taken us 10 years to raise 2 million. But now we're kind of gone full time with the charity now.
Right. So if people want to get involved and help fund the research, which is obviously critical from all the research that you've been doing, how can they do that? How can they get involved and help fund this project?
Well, we've tried to make it as fun as possible for people. The first thing we do is let people know how big the problem is and try and inspire them. And we've come up with a project called the £1,000 Challenge. And so this is where people can commit to try and raise £1,000. It doesn't matter if they don't, but they can just try and raise £1,000 over whatever period they want, hopefully within 6 months or 7 months, and in any way they want.
Okay. Can you give us some examples of any £1,000 challenges out there, some that you've come across before? Some
of the moms from school, they do things like coffee mornings where they make cakes, and they do all fun things like that, and they raise about £200 or £300 at a time, or quiz nights, £200 or £300 every night then, and 3 of those a year, you've got your £1,000. And
well, what we do, Joe, is once somebody rings us up and says, I want to take the challenge, we send them a pack which gives them 100 different ideas, and we send them all the posters and the stuff that they need to promote it, and set up a Just Giving page for them, so it's easy for people to donate online. And then we take them through 2 or 3 stages where we set a date for whatever the event's going to be, and if they want some support, we get them in the local press. And then at the end, we have a ceremony where they get a certificate and they get a pin from the charity, and then we're building a wall in at our offices, the charity offices, and everybody who takes the challenge, we lay a brick with their name on the brick, and we're building this we want this wall to get as high as possible. And the significance of this is it's going to make it difficult for the cancer to get over, because the more money we raise, the higher the wall goes, and the more money we've got for research, which will stop it. Because we're currently at 15% survival, and the others were there, but with the money that was raised, they're now at 80.
Wow,
so
fantastic.
That's just in the UK alone, there are 48,000 brain tumours diagnosed each year, and with a 15% survival rate. I mean, that's adults and children. Right. With a 15% survival rate, you can work out how many people are dying every year, and we can get that up to 80%. All we need is the money. We've got all of the expertise, we've got the laboratory, the scientists, but we just need to pay for the wages, pay for the equipment, pay for the tissue. And over the next 10 years, we can get the survival of brain tumours to 80%.
Joining me now, we have Mike, Pam and their son Sam, who was diagnosed with a brain tumour 2 years ago. So I'm going to start with you, Sam. So what do you remember about first becoming poorly?
The first proper memory of being in hospital was when my prof said, took me into a room and said that unfortunately I had a brain tumour, and that was my first thing that he told me.
And what did you feel like when they told you that?
I felt a bit worried, but also I thought, let's beat it and get on with it. And
yeah, I can see you're very strong when you say that. So what's it been like with your friends since you've become poorly? Have you not been able to go out with them as much, or?
Well, at the time I was just starting secondary school, so I didn't have many friends. But over the last couple of years when I was in hospital, they did a lot of things for me, And now I'm back at school full time. They're really looking out for me and helping me a lot.
Okay, so if we go over to Pam now. So you've been working with the Joseph Foote charity. How important is the work that they do?
It's vital, really, because there's very little government funding for research into brain tumours. The statistics on brain tumours are quite horrendous. They kill more children and young people under 40 than any other form of cancer, and yet they get less than 1% of the national funding. So it's down to individuals like Andy and other people, other campaigners, to raise the money to enable research to improve outcomes for people like Sam.
We've been talking about the £1,000 challenges, and that's why we're here, to try and get people to sign up and take them. What would your message be to people out there? Why should people take the £1,000 challenges? If you want to answer that, you can. Or
I suppose that's a challenge for them, but also to have something out of it. So like they've got to do it to raise the money, but then also they've done it themselves
to help others.
Others try.
So what are your hopes for the future?
To raise as much money as possible, and to make more and more people aware of the situation that young people find themselves in when they're diagnosed with a brain tumour. Education falls way behind the standards that you would expect, because there's nothing in place for the children to go back into education. Nobody knows how to work with them. And you have to fight, and that's hard when you're already living quite a difficult life anyway. But the more money that can be raised for the research, the better the outcome for the young people. The earlier the diagnosis, the better the treatment, the less the disabilities, because unlike any other cancer, a brain tumour actually does leave behind many disabilities because of the injury to the brain itself, and those have to be overcome. And you need a lot of determination.
So what's your message to someone out there that's thinking about doing the £1,000 challenge?
I would try to encourage them to do it, just to go for it and have a go, and if they can't do it, at least they've tried.
It's such a great cause to be able to raise money for.
It is.
I'm now joined by Andrea. You got diagnosed with a brain tumour about 6 months ago. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the end of January, wasn't it?
Yes.
Can you just tell us a bit about what you've been through, and as well you, Nick, Andrea's partner, about how it's affected your lives and what you've been through in the last 6 months?
Andrea's quite an active person normally, quite forceful in her manner, and around about Christmas time, sort of generally her demeanour sort of changed, and we sort of knew something was wrong, but we went through the process of elimination of, it could be a winter cold, it could be migraines, it could be diabetes, it could be all of these things. So we went to the doctors and sort of trying to eliminate all these things. Definitely something not right. We don't automatically go to the hospital and say, I think I've got a brain tumour because I've got a headache, because the NHS would be overrun with people. And we definitely knew something was wrong. And when we had sort of violent headaches that were making us sick and loss of coordination and confusion, that's when bells start ringing.
It was the tiredness as well, wasn't it?
Tiredness,
so tired.
which is not unlike you, to be honest, isn't it? You don't sort of give in very easily or lie around. It's, come on, we've got to get out and do something, or either go shopping, walk the dog, or we're doing something, and that just wasn't happening. And that sort of, when you start adding these things back up in hindsight, you then come to your conclusion, we've got to get some help.
Right, and that was when they diagnosed the brain tumour.
Well, I went and got some blood tests first of all, because I wasn't sure if I'd got a thyroid problem or something, because I was so tired. So I went and asked for those, and they came back absolutely fine. And then I was in Norfolk at Christmas with my mum, and the headaches were that violent, and I was that sick. I've never known anything like it. And I went to the doctors, and they told me they thought I might have a sinus problem, which I accepted because I know that can be painful. And then when we got home, it was just continued to be really bad, and I thought that's not right. So I went to my own GP and decided I'd go and have an eye test. And when I went for my eye test, she didn't get very far through it, and she said, "You've got swollen optical nerve, which could mean something else.
Right.
So I'm going to send you up to A&E." And she did, sent me up that day, and they kept me in overnight, did a scan, told me I'd got a tumour. And to be honest, it didn't sink in. I'd got a friend with me, and she said, "Did you hear what he said?" And I said, "Yeah." But it didn't mean anything. I wasn't at all alarmed by it. It was
Just, I guess, a shock that didn't set in for a while.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're more or less, yeah, it's a brain tumour. What's next?
I keep getting from everyone I've spoken to so far, like, the huge amounts of positivity that's surrounded by it. And I find it incredible.
I think that does count for a lot. Positive thoughts, positive approach gets people through quite a lot.
If you had a message to people out there that were thinking about doing the £1,000 challenge, why should people take up the £1,000 challenge now?
It's a cause that isn't well publicised, and we need to bring it more to the public awareness. We get a lot of other cancers get a lot more publicity, and these sort of cancers are not easy to deal with. It does affect people's lives greatly. I'm not saying that the other cancers don't, but they're all to a greater or lesser degree. These cancers kill more people, and they get unpublicised. These people, you can have a non-cancerous brain tumour that will kill you in days. You can have a cancerous one that can be there for years. But the more research that we get now, we'll be able to target those areas that need to be focused on, especially with these new drugs that are coming through and new technologies. And day by day, things change. If we go back 4 or 5 years, we hadn't got the technology we've got today.
And that all comes at a price.
And it comes at a cost.
Which is why it's so important for people to
is. In the real
sign
world,
up and do this.
That's where we live, and we know things come at a cost.
Yeah. So, Andrew, what are your hopes for the future?
just that I can go on living a reasonably healthy life, I suppose. It's incurable, so it's always going to be there. I hope that I don't have to have more surgery, but if I do, I'll just do what I've done over the last few months, and that'll be it.
We shall remain positive, won't we?
We shall indeed.
We shall fight the fight until it cannot be fought anymore. But we'll give it our best shot.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
I'm with Professor Richard Grundy, who works with the Joseph Foote charity. Could you start by telling us a bit about yourself and how you became involved with the Joseph Foote charity?
Thank you, yes. Working with the charity now for some 10 years, started by a realisation that children and adults with brain cancer have a very poor outcome. And in order to improve their outcomes, their chance of survival, we needed to better understand why the tumours arose, which tumours might behave better than others and respond to treatments, and then develop new treatments specifically against the kinds of cancers that arise within the head.
Why did you get involved with this specific charity?
It came about through looking after Andy and Jude's son Joseph, who had an ependymoma, and unfortunately, despite very many attempts to cure him, sadly died relatively recently. At that time, we had very little understanding about this particular brain tumour in childhood, and very little research was being done. So Judy and Andy started to raise funds to get the ball rolling in terms of research, and we've now published a number of groundbreaking studies in this disease, including a paper in Nature just recently.
So how important is the work that the Joseph Foote charity is doing?
Crucial, because it remains a Cinderella subject within medicine, and although it kills a significant number of children and adults, and the children or adults that survive are often left with significant disability, there's very little dedicated funding that helps to understand the tumours better and to treat them better. And we have to, at the moment, we rely on funding such as Joseph Foote and others who have started to work together to raise the profile of this disease.
I was quite shocked when they were saying, it's a bigger killer than some cancers out there that get all the press and the media attention, and yet we don't realise just how much of a bigger killer this is in adults and children.
Absolutely. It's the major cause of cancer-related death in children, and half as many children die of brain tumours and of leukemia, which used to be the major killer of childhood cancer.
So if you were encouraging people out there to take the £1,000 challenge, which is obviously all about raising money for the Joseph Foote charity, and obviously then you can do some more research, what would you say to people to encourage them to do it?
The charity relies on public support to raise vital money for research, and anybody who has been touched by this illness or knows of someone who has died from this disease, please help us, because this is a really important opportunity to drive things forward.
Having spoken to so many people this morning, I'm quite shocked about just how positive everybody is. There's such a positive vibe when I spoke to Sam earlier, and everyone's very hopeful for the future, and with all the money that we can hopefully get. What would you say your hopes are for the future?
We've actually come a significant distance in the last 5 years, and one of the major projects we're wanting to do is to unravel the underlying code that causes brain tumours to misbehave, and that allow us to develop even better treatments against this disease, because many children and adults suffer the side effects of the treatments we presently give. We're fighting fire with fire, and we have to be able to develop more intelligent and smart treatments than we currently have, and the research is a vital way of doing that.
Could you tell me a bit about how Joseph's case affected you personally, and if it was something that made you get involved in the charity in the first place?
There actually wasn't a charity until Joseph came along. He was diagnosed with a ependymoma, which occurs in the third most common childhood brain tumour. And at the time, he knew very little about that particular disease. He was started on a very intensive chemotherapy strategy, which I clearly monitored him through. Sadly, his disease came back on a number of occasions before he finally succumbed. And we have, since that time, since the start some 10 years ago, learnt a significant amount about this disease. Sadly, too late to help Joe, but clearly it will be of help, I intend, for children like this in the future, and therefore will be done in Joseph's memory. But that's a very important role that his family and all the people that support this charity are very much supporting.
He sounded like a very incredible little boy.
He
to
was
his parents.
Very much so, very brave, articulate, bright boy who was sadly taken away from us by a very difficult illness, difficult to treat illness, and that's why the research is so important.